Hello, everyone. My name is Sian Eager, and I am the Theatres at Risk Advice Manager here at Theatres Trust, and I also manage our Resilient Theatres, Resilient Communities programme. I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar, where we're going to hear about the importance of data in monitoring and evaluation. So I'd just like to say a brief word about Theatres Trust before we start. Theatres Trust is the national advisory and advocacy body for theatres across the UK. As a department for culture, medium and sport arm's length body, which is quite a mouthful, it means that we are empowered to support and protect theatres across the UK. Through our impartial professional advice service, sector skills bank and grant giving services, we are able to champion the future of live performance and support theatre owners and operators to develop best practice in building design and management. This webinar is part of a series that we're running through our Resilient Theatres, Resilient Communities programme. This is a pilot 3-year support programme that is being generously funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, as well as the Pilgrim Trust and Swire Charitable Trust. This is the first webinar of 2025, and we've previously run webinars on a range of subjects such as governance, audience development, and fundraising. These webinars are available to view on our website if you're interested, and we will put a link to the webpage in the chat for you to access at a future time. Our next webinar is planned for the summer, and that will be on the topic of theatre operations. So we'll share more details about that nearer the time. Please look out for that in our newsletter and on social media, and I hope to see some of you at future events. So it's my job to give some housekeeping notes about today's session. I'm hearing that my voice is very quiet. I can try to increase my volume and get a bit nearer the microphone if that helps. Apologies for that. So as is fitting with a subject, a webinar on evaluation, you will, after the event, receive a link to a short online survey asking for your feedback. And we would really appreciate it if you could take the time to fill that in so that we can gather your thoughts on our work and help improve our services in the future. Please could I ask all members of the audience to turn off the video and microphones during the event. We'd ask attendees to keep your settings throughout the duration of the webinar so that we can all focus on our speakers and the slides. And we would recommend the side-by-side speaker view to enable you to see both the slides and speakers to the best advantage. And we are recording the event, and I noticed a little question has just popped up about whether that will be shared. You will receive a link to the recording to the edited video of the session in approximately a week, and the videos will also be uploaded to the website at a later date for general viewing. We will also be sharing the slides from today's webinar. We have enabled captioning for the webinar, and if you'd like to make use of this, please select the live transcript option, which is available on your Zoom menu, where you see the double C button. If you do have any technical issues during the session, please use the chat facility and message the Theatres Trust host directly rather than sending a message to everyone, and a member of the team will do their best to assist you. So just a reminder about the format of the session. We're going to hear presentations from the 3 speakers, which we're aiming to take approximately an hour. We then have time available for a question and answer session. If you have a question, please feel free to put that in the chat and we will pick that up and then raise that at the end of the session. If you want to direct your question to a particular speaker, then please identify that when you type in your question. Okay, so that's all of our housekeeping for this session. So we would just want to now move on to our content. So today's webinar will be giving us an overview of the important role that data plays in evaluation and monitoring. I know from my own perspective that this is a topic that it is really important in today's climate, but I also recognise that it is perhaps something that I could give a little bit more attention to in my day-to-day work, and perhaps many of you feel the same. We know that there's such a great amount of work being done across the theatre sector, work that is inspiring, that is bringing communities together, that's really creating opportunity and great social value, but we're perhaps not that great, or we could develop our own practice in evidencing the value of that work, helping us to engage with stakeholders and decision makers, but also, perhaps equally as importantly, to reflect on our own practice and help us with growth and improvement and development. So it's clearly a really important topic, and I'm really pleased that we've got three excellent speakers who are going to be here today to share their knowledge and expertise and also their real life experience of being involved in this work. So we're going to hear from Catherine Bloodworth from Bright Culture Consultancy, Abby Roberts, who is the Development and Communications Director at the Mercury Theatre in Colchester, and Professor Vanessa Toulmin, who is the Chair of Morecambe Winter Gardens. So I'd now like to welcome our first speaker, Catherine. Catherine is a cultural engagement professional with significant experience in evaluation, public engagement, audience development, and strategic development within the arts and heritage sector. Catherine is going to outline why evaluation matters, what theatres should aim to evaluate, and share some top tips on best practice. So over to you, Catherine. Thank you.
Good morning, or should I say probably good afternoon, now we're past 12 o'clock. Thank you, Sian, for the introduction. So where to start then? I guess we start with a definition. What is evaluation? Evaluation is the process of gathering and thinking about information to understand how well a project, performance, or programme has worked, what difference it made, and how it can be improved in the future. We should also probably define what is data. And I think that's an interesting one, because I think we probably have different perspectives of what data actually is. Data essentially is information that's collected for reference or for analysis, and it includes figures, numbers, as well as descriptive information. So it's not just the numbers we're talking about when we say data. In terms of effective evaluation, this involves several key steps. 1, having a clear purpose. What do you want to understand and learn, and why? What questions do you want to answer? 2, choosing methods that will enable you to collect a range of evidence and data from different people. 3, analysing, reviewing, and reflecting on your collective information. 4, sharing what you learn with stakeholders and audiences. And 5, taking action and doing something with what you have learned. Traditionally, evaluation has been used to assess outcomes and demonstrate success, determining whether goals are met and resources were well used, which is still a fundamental part of evaluation. However, the other critical role of evaluation is learning and growth, as Sian mentioned. It's about uncovering what's working and what isn't, and why, so you can adapt, refine, and enhance. Insights gained mid and end of delivery inform ongoing decisions and help teams reflect on and improve their practice. It requires being comfortable with things not always going according to plan, developing an environment where people can have honest and open conversations, and accepting failure as a healthy part of that process. The slide you can currently see shows you a number of ways that evaluation can help theatres. Evaluation is a measurement tool, but it also provides an opportunity for theatres to enhance their impact, refine their practice, and connect more deeply with audiences and communities. It can encourage the setting of measurable organisational objectives, whether artistic, educational, or operational, to allow tracking of progress over time. It can create space. We just go back to slide for a minute, please. It can create space for artists, staff, facilitators, and stakeholders to assess what worked and what didn't, fostering a culture of continuous learning and improvement in both creative and operational decisions. It can provide insight into audience preferences, behaviours, and barriers to engagement, ensuring programming reflects and serves diverse communities. It can demonstrate transparency and accountability to funders, partners, and audiences. It also can help uncover unexpected outcomes such as personal growth or community connection, capturing the full value of theatre in people's lives. It offers insights into long-term planning and resource allocation, helping to identify opportunities and manage risk. It can provide evidence and narratives to demonstrate the theatre's impact, which can strengthen funding bids and public support. So quite wide-ranging. Next slide, please. Evaluation can sometimes get a bad rap, and it's something I come up against a lot as an external evaluator and easily fall off the priority list, perhaps because some of the more common myths. Myth 1, evaluation is just about measuring success. Many believe evaluation only happens at the end to prove success with numbers and reports, but as mentioned, real evaluation is a learning tool. Clearly, a theatre's success isn't just about sold-out shows or 5-star reviews, nice as they may be, but evaluation helps explore other questions like, did this production resonate with our community? What did artists, audiences, and collaborators take away from it? Myth 2, you need to be an expert to do it well. You don't need to be an expert to undertake evaluation. It's about asking good questions, listening, watching what happens, and reviewing. Theatre teams already engage in reflection and feedback in a number of different ways. You don't always need an external evaluator, but sometimes getting external support to build team confidence and set up structures may make evaluation easier long term. Well, there may be times when the objectivity of an external evaluator is particularly beneficial. Myth 3, you only use numbers. While quantitative data like audience attendance numbers can be helpful, qualitative insights, stories, testimonials, and audience reactions are equally important. They capture the emotional, social, and cultural impact of work that numbers alone will miss. Myth 4, it takes too much time and money. This is the one I probably hear the most of. Evaluation doesn't have to be a vast formal project. It can be built into what you're already doing. A 10-minute reflection after a performance, a simple post-event survey, a group debrief with staff, actors, and facilitators. Crucially, evaluation is scalable and should serve you, not overwhelm you. Next slide, please. So what should theatres be evaluating? Let's start with the audience experience. You'll likely want to find out who's attending, considering demographics, repeat visitors, new audiences. Are they engaged? How are they responding? Why do they come or not come back? There are a number of ways you can find answers to these questions. The most direct way is to understand audience experience, is clearly to ask. You can use tools like short surveys, paper, online, or QR codes in the programme or lobby, comment cards or feedback walls, quick post-show interviews or vox pops, follow-up emails with a few reflective questions, asking things like, how did the performance make you feel? What stood out or stayed with you? Would you recommend this to a friend? Why or why not? Also consider more creative ways of asking for feedback, such as provide mood boards and ask audience to mark how they felt. Use one-word responses on a wall or flip chart. Invite people to write postcards to the performers or characters. Collect audio or video diaries if resource allows, or if the audience is a good audience for that. The key is to consider who you are looking for feedback from and tailor feedback opportunities to them. Try a range of approaches and track their successes. You can speak to people about their preferences or methods for sharing their views. Also think about how you can incentivize and thank people for giving up their time with competitions and offers. However, despite offering various approaches for audience to provide feedback, not everyone will. So you'll also need to watch, observe, and listen. You might want to consider, how did the audience react during the performance? Did people stay and talk after the show? Were certain scenes particularly moving, funny, or thought-provoking for an audience? Take notes or photos if you have permission to document responses. Audience experience can also be understood after people leave the theatre through social media comments, word of mouth, and repeat visits. Keep an eye on patterns and stories, what people say, not just what they tick in boxes. Next slide, please. As a theatre, you will probably want to understand your impact on the local community. Evaluating the theatre's impact on communities goes beyond ticket sales or attendance. It's about understanding how theatre can contribute to people's lives, relationships, and sense of belonging. To do this, you'll want to start by clearly focusing on what kind of impact are you hoping to make? For example, building community connections, amplifying underrepresented voices, supporting local well-being or education. You should then consider different opportunities to listen to your community about its engagement and experience with the theatre. This could include community conversations or focus groups, informal chats before or after events, feedback from partners, schools, local organisations, community gatekeepers, listening sessions with participants and attendees. Your findings should be shared with the people they affect, which will build trust and respect. Ensure you share findings in plain, accessible language. Celebrate success and acknowledge areas to grow. Use feedback to adapt and improve, not just report. Next slide, please. Another area that theatres are likely to want to evaluate is artistic and organisational growth. When reflecting on artistic ambition and growth, a theatre might like to consider a number of different questions, such as, what risks did we take artistically? Did it meet the creative vision? Is our work evolving in terms of theme, style, or relevance? Organisational growth questions to consider might be, are staff supported, skilled, and confident in their roles? How effective are internal systems like communication, planning, and evaluation? Are we seen as a trusted and collaborative organisation? Methods that can be used are actors, directors, staff reflections and interviews, peer feedback, post-show creative team debriefs, creative journals, annual or seasonal cross-departmental reflection sessions, and skills and staff skills mapping. Next slide, please. Another area that a theatre may wish to evaluate is its economic sustainability, much of which is already likely to be being undertaken within your organisation. Evaluating this aspect of a theatre can include assessing financial health, reviewing income diversity, evaluating earning capacity, and analysing funding strategies. There isn't time to go into all of those in depth this morning, but there's many different aspects within all of that that you may wish to look at. Next slide, please. To finish off, I'd like to share a brief overview of some of the key things to consider when approaching evaluation. 1. Set clear goals. Decide exactly what you want to achieve in your work. This could be creative, financial, community-related, or how your organisation theatre operates. Ensure your goals are measurable to determine if you're succeeding. Additionally, consider what specific questions you want to evaluate and to answer. 2. Use both quantitative and qualitative data and evidence. It's easy to focus on just one type of data. Theatres often collect metrics such as the number of attendees, the number of tickets sold. However, it's also crucial to gather stories and feedback which reveal what people think or feel, providing the narratives to the numbers. If you rely solely on one type of data, you'll only see one part of the picture, and it can be misleading. 3. Gather feedback from multiple sources. Before developing new feedback methods, review what's already in place. Tap into existing communication channels like social media comments, surveys, post-show notes, and regular meetings. You may have more insight than you think. Look for easy wins, small tweaks, such as adding a question at ticket booking, e.g., is this your first visit, or opt-ins for staying in touch so you can contact them post-event for reflection and feedback. This can generate valuable data, and I've been surprised at how many venues don't have these things in place. You may also include QR codes linking to surveys and programs. Don't rely on just one feedback method, though. A single source can skew results or exclude voices. Instead, use a mix and time your feedback to track progress or changes over time. 4. Pilot and test different ways of collecting evidence. Test and learn. Try different feedback approaches over time. See what resonates. Don't assume you know what people prefer. Most will speak up if they've loved or hated something. We're all human, but reaching the middle ground requires more thoughtful design. Language, tone, visuals, and format all impact and response rates. Some people engage with playful prompts, others need incentives like a competition or a money off voucher. One venue I worked with saw a considerable boost in feedback just by upgrading a feedback postcard from a traditional size to a larger quality A5 version with larger writing. Such a simple thing, but made a massive difference. If you're running focus groups on marketing or programming, use the opportunity to test multiple feedback methods too. 5. Seek out voices. Seek out all voices. Aim for a full picture by listening to audience, participants, staff, volunteers, partners, and stakeholders. Everyone's perspective matters. 6. Be realistic and proportional in the collection of evidence and data. Don't try to collect feedback and evaluate everything you do. It is unlikely to be unfeasible and can be overwhelming. Instead, focus on the areas where gaining more knowledge and information will be most useful and valuable to you. Resist the urge to collect data, for data's sake, without a clear purpose for what you intend to do with the information, a trap that a lot of people fall into. Having clear objectives and evaluation questions you wish to answer can help define your priorities. Next slide, please. 7, reflect on artistic intent. Evaluate whether the creative vision was clear, achieved, and aligned with your goals. Consider audience responses, artist experience, and overall artistic quality. 8, make feedback easy and inclusive. Use clear jargon-free language and offer multiple ways to respond, written, verbal, online, in person. Be mindful of accessibility and cultural sensitivities, and think about how to ensure that people feel safe and understood, which will foster honesty. Consider when an external facilitator may assist in encouraging more open responses, such as in focus groups or Vox Pops interviews. 9, consider community impact. Look beyond the stage. Did the work reflect or serve the community? Remove barriers and build trust. 10, plan for evaluation. Treat evaluation like any project and have a plan. The evaluation plan should include clear goals, questions to answers, methods, timelines, and responsibilities. Make evaluation a continuous part of delivery and operation processes. And finally, use insights to shape the future. Transform evaluation into action. Allow what you learn to guide programming choices, marketing, accessibility, and how you engage with the audiences in the future. When evaluation focuses solely on showcasing success, it can become performative, concentrating on metrics that look good rather than those that provide real insight. However, when evaluation fosters improvement, it supports innovation and experimentation, encourages honesty and transparency, builds trust among teams and stakeholders, and leads to more sustainable and impactful results. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, for that whistle-stop overview and introduction to the topic. Really great to have an introduction to those areas where theatres may want to undertake evaluation and some practical tips as to how to approach it. I appreciate that. Thank you. Catherine will be joining us again at the end of the session, so if you do have any questions for her, please do put them in the chat. So I'd now like to introduce our second presentation, which is from Abby Roberts, who is the Development and Communications Director at the Mercury Theatre in Colchester. Abby has over a decade of fundraising experience across various specialisms and causes. She's now part of the senior leadership team at the Mercury and oversees the development, marketing and ticketing departments. Abby's going to talk to us about how to approach collecting data to evidence economic impact, drawing on her experience of working in this area in relation to an economic impact report that was jointly commissioned by the Mercury and other cultural organisations in the region. So over to you, Abby. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So yes, obviously a bit of background about my role Sian just shared. So I'll just give you, anyone who doesn't know, a bit of a background in the organisation. So the Mercury is a mid-scale regional theatre. We're based in Colchester City Centre in Essex. We opened in 1972. We welcome over sort of 130,000 people annually into the building. And we have 2 theatre spaces. One is our 530-seater main house and a 98-seater studio, as well as a variety of the community engagement activities I'm sure we all do. So in 2021, we reopened after a £12-ish million capital refurbishment. I say ish because COVID got in the way slightly. So we now have new rehearsal, dance, meeting and community spaces, as well as vastly improved front of house facilities, technical capabilities and sustainability measures. Part of the initial feasibility study for the capital project was to commission an economic impact report. It was the rationale behind it initially and primarily was to prove that the economic impact of the theatre was great enough that the capital investment was worthy investment of public funds. But we also saw it as a really great opportunity to have a tool that we could then use for other funders, especially continued local authority funding. We could have done it just ourselves, but as an organisation solely, but we proposed to the other NPOs in Colchester that we actually commission it as a group, so that we're essentially representing the cultural sort of sector of the town, sort of stronger together, as it were. And it also meant that we could share the cost of the consultation as well. So the other organisations that partnered with us was First Sight, which is a modern art gallery with an auditorium and multi-use spaces, Colchester Art Centre, which is a 400 capacity art centre based just next door to us in an old church, and Signals, who are a very small media charity working with young people to engage in media arts, so whether that's sort of podcasting, broadcasting, etc. For the purpose of this sort of study, although Signals was involved, they are not as anywhere near as public facing. They're not a venue as such, so I probably won't end up talking about them that much, but they were part of the process. Next slide, please. So essentially, so we commissioned a consultant to do this, a company called DC Research. They work to the HM Treasury's Green Book approach, which is not to be confused with the Theatre Green Book, but it sets out the parameters and compares a baseline scenario, which is essentially doing nothing, and the proposed sort of intervention or investment scenario. So for us, it was, well, for everyone, it was the activity that we do on an annual basis. So in this situation, a hypothetical scenario, sort of the nothing scenario, you can assume that none of us exist as venues. And then in comparison, the intervention scenario in this case would be to take into account the full impact of all the partners across a financial year. The way you sort of split up the data you are collecting is that they look at direct impact, which is sort of the venue specific employment and the spend and turnover of those organisations, and the GVA, gross value added impacts around that. And then the indirect impact is what they call the supplier linkage effects. So it's kind of looking at employment generated elsewhere in the local economy due to what it is we procure. And then the induced impact is, as it says, it's the sort of employment generated in the local community as a consequence of the spending of the wages and salaries of those employed by us, but then also by the companies that we procure from. So it's quite a lengthy process, but if you just sort of imagine it kind of like a drop in the ocean, as it were, and the ripple effect out. Next slide, please. So what data and how? So data collection, we sort of grouped into 3 processes. First of all, we did sort of detailed review of key data from all 4 partners. That was included data on employment, procurement and supply, existing procurement and suppliers, obviously visitors, cultural programming, catering, conferencing, planned capital, investment, etc. So it was kind of what we would call the hard data, as it was, the facts and figures. We were able, every partner could provide the majority of those. We also did a survey. We did lots of surveying of sort of patrons and visitors. Most of these were e-surveys of visitors to the MIT for us to the theatre, and they were carried out over a 3-month period. We also then had consultations with key partners, staff, trustees and stakeholders. So it was a number of one-to-one face-to-face consultations were carried out with a range of individuals over another 3-month period. So it took, all in all, it took about 6 months to collect that data. It could have been shortened, but it's just the way it worked for us. In terms of sort of the hard data, as I mentioned, so financial, staff numbers, visitor numbers, etc., we use the vast data that we can get already from our ticketing software. So we use Spectrix, and then we also used other software such as our HR software and accounting software. In terms of results across our partners, it was at the point that we did it, the Mercury was probably ahead of other venues in terms of our ticketing and data capturing, and we already issued sort of post-show surveys, so our audiences were probably warmer to this than others, although sometimes the actual response number was greater in another venue, which was interesting. So we also supplied the consultants with the reporting that we already had. Obviously, we as an NPO, we have existing reporting that we need to do, like everyone, I'm sure, whether you're an NPO or not. So because we were already in the process, we already had a process for collecting data, we were able to supply what we already report on. So in this case, it was a benefit, as our data collection and collation was sort of to a point already pre-existing. In terms of being able to collect data and the readiness of its availability, obviously as a theatre we have much more audience data than that of a museum or gallery. If a venue or event isn't ticketed, then obviously knowing anything about your visitors is immediately much harder, and attempting to engage with them in a meaningful way for specific data collection can be harder if you're sort of starting from zero. And a side note to that is that this is why we always try to push and try to ticket events, even if they're free, so that we can capture the data of our visitors. Next slide, please. So following on from the end point of the previous slide, one of the main challenges that the consultants found was that the different levels and abilities for the organisations to collect the necessary data. So by ability, I mean that every organisation was starting at a different point. As mentioned, we already had a sophisticated CRM system, whereas Signals and First Sight at the time had very limited data on their users. We all had different priorities, so we were sort of more willing to attempt, if you like, to collate the data that we wanted to see. Whether that was, we also had different relationships, because, for example, we as an organisation, we had a much closer relationship with our sort of local, our borough council, our local authority, so we had the ability to get them in a room to discuss economic impact, whereas other organisations might not have been able to do that. And the final challenge of working with partners is that the resource and investment of sort of all partners is varied. So to be blunt, it was an idea driven by the Mercury. We had a timeline because we needed it to be part of this feasibility study. And that feasibility study would go into our application for stage 2 capital investment from the Arts Council for the capital project. So we were obviously quite invested and could allow staff time for the collation of data to a point. Whereas for other organisations that had either never worked in this way or didn't have the same sense of urgency, it wasn't as much of a priority, or the work needed, sort of as discussed in the last presentation, it feels quite challenging. It can sometimes feel, the idea of it can feel quite challenging and daunting compared to the reality of it. So for us as a theatre, we had some examples of how that data that was collected was quite skewed. This included, so the programming at the time of the data collection was very sort of heavy, drama heavy, I should say. So when asked about preference of genre, drama was really high, because obviously we were surveying audiences that were currently, I mean, we surveyed everyone through e-surveys, but because quite often we had sort of post-show surveys with or questionnaires with links to these questions, we were getting some really high levels of sort of genre, drama lovers, as it were. Whereas I think if we'd surveyed audiences across a 12-month period, drama would not have been as high in terms of their favourite genre, because we can tell from ticket sales that it is quite a hard genre to sell to our audiences. Another example of skewed, for us, of skewed data is that in hindsight, we would probably put panto as a genre on its own. So we didn't. Instead, we didn't include it as such, and we think it might have skewed the data collection in this part of the study, as some people would have included it in a family programming, some would have thought of it as a musical, some might have thought of it as other. So it sort of diluted the response to that genre. So I think it was a learning from us, because panto is obviously one of our best sellers. Next slide, please. I think this is probably the most interesting part of what I'm talking to you about. So one of the most interesting and useful stats that we have been able to use has been sort of off-site spend per visitor to the theatre. This was measured primarily through survey feedback, asking questions such as if their primary reason for visiting the town centre was to come to the theatre, did they pay to park? Did they also visit retail or hospitality offerings? And if so, what was the rough spend doing so? So from this information, we found that there was an additional direct spend outside of the Mercury of 1.6 million, roughly, annually, for every adult visitor. We did not take into account children. We found that the visits per adult per year was also very interesting. So the Mercury and the Arts and the Arts Centre was very similar in that stat, so both being on average about 3 times a year. However, First Sight as a gallery was much higher, at an average of 12 visits per year. And this is probably, well, it's due partly to the kind of unticketed drop-in nature of a gallery. And also the customer data that First Sight did have access to was primarily for people booking community group activities who use their hireable spaces. So this would make sense if they kind of held or attended regular activities or meetings that they were regularly attending. In terms of visitor geography, that was also part of looking at our reach geographically. From the data available, all venues had a very similar breakdown of geographical travel and home location for their visitors. So approximately 55% were Colchester residents, 40% were Essex or Suffolk. We're quite close to the border with Suffolk, so approximately a 20-mile radius. And then the remaining 5% were from further afield. Yeah, as I say, the breakdown was very similar across all of the venues in town. In terms of so what we found in terms of our economic impact, it can be broken down into, so our total procurement expenditure in an annual year was £2.77 million. The total on-site and off-site spend by audiences was 3.66 million. And actually again, what was interesting is that the average off-site spend per adult was £17. And that's a really great stat to be able to use. If we combine these totals, then the Mercury, sort of the overall economic impact of the Mercury is about 6.43 million. Overall, with the 3 main partners combined, the procurement expenditure was 3.43 million, and the combined on-site and off-site spend by audiences was 5.47. In terms of sort of findings and learnings from the process, I would say, although I do think this is obvious, that in this study, audience surveying gave us the most important insights. And having spoken to the consultants fairly recently, because we're actually in the process of looking at redoing this, they said that stakeholder and sort of consultancy and meetings was really valuable as well, to be able to get a real understanding of the town as a whole, and the town's economic sort of footprint as a whole, and then how we sit in that. But for us, we felt, and what we have been able to use since, it's actually the audience feedback that has been really interesting. Our hard data collection is clearly very valuable and helped us greatly when calculating procurement impact, for example. But being able to say that the average adult off-site spend per visit to the theatre is almost £20, supporting other businesses and driving footfall into the town centre, has been really, really valuable. Next slide, please. So yeah, what has been the impact of the report? So for us, the obvious positive impact was that the progression of the capital build, this made up part of the feasibility study, needed to unlock the additional Arts Council funding. So we were successful in securing £4 million from them for the project. It has also been really valuable, like physical tool to present to local authorities. We're lucky enough to still have city and county council revenue funding, but obviously it's reviewed annually, it's getting harder, and we're also in a position where Essex is going to be one of the first borough sort of counties to go through the new phase of devolution, so it's only going to be more important. The fact that it's an independent study, it's given us the evidence of just how important the theatre and the wider cultural sector is for the local economy, and we all know that this is fast becoming the focus of public funds over the art itself. And then this study did allow for wider MPO working, and since this report we have collaborated on other projects, including research projects and sort of town-wide cultural events. We still have our challenges, mainly getting everyone in a room at once, but I think it has allowed us all to be more transparent and collaborative in the way we work. And finally, a small one, but still a really positive impact, is that if we're prospecting a new corporate supporter, or perhaps just trying to upgrade or renew a current one, being able to discuss the economic impact of the organisation allows them to appreciate sort of our value as a business, if you like, in the words and the language they understand. And it means that they see us, hopefully, as an important and sort of viable part of what Colchester has to offer. And that is kind of it, really. I'm sure there'll be some questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Abby. I'm just waiting for our spotlight to be sorted. I really appreciate you coming here today and sharing your real life experience of what it's been like to tackle such a big topic as economic impact, and giving us some insight there into some of the challenges and the realities of approaching that. So thank you very much. There was a comment in the chat about the cost of this work. Feel free, Abby, to respond to that in the chat if you like, because people were getting involved around that topic. So now we're going to move on to our final speaker before the Q&A at the end of the session. So I'd now like to introduce Professor Vanessa Toulmin. Vanessa is Chair of Early Film and Popular Entertainment at the University of Sheffield and Director of City, Culture and Public Engagement, where she leads on cultural-led regeneration. However, today she's going to be talking to us in her capacity as the voluntary chair of Morecambe Winter Gardens Preservation Trust. Vanessa is going to speak about the value and importance of raw data from her perspective as the leader of a largely volunteer-led organisation that is working with many national, regional and local partners and funders. So over to you, Vanessa. Thank you.
Thank you, Sian. Can we have the first slide, please? So this is the Morecambe Winter Gardens. I'm the chair. I'm not actually in the theatre. I've just got a really sexy Zoom screen. And I'm very proud of the theatre, but the theatre is very different from many of the people who are on this call. We're a theatre who are basically undergoing cultural and capital regeneration. We are a Grade 2 star listed building on the National Builders at Risk, formerly 2,500 capacity, probably about 3,500 in the 1900s, closed in 77, has years of risk, salvation, and now operated by the Winter Gardens Preservation Trust, formally following a governance review which was funded by the Theatres Trust, and I inadvertently became the chair, but that's a different story. Next slide. So we're volunteer-led and delivered, and that means everything. We have got 45 plus volunteers. We are now in the middle of a capital project from DCMS Arts Council, CDF funding free, and so we have project staff, but the day-to-day running of the theatre, the opening and shutting, the cafe, the revenue, data collection is done by volunteers. So it's very unusual in many cases, but very symptomatic of many heritage-led organisations in the country. So I hope there's people on this call who can learn from some of the things that we've experienced over the last 5 years. We now have project staff, and we have a great project staff who's actually analyses the data that we put together and cleans it in a way that is usable and for reporting, and I'll talk about that. But ultimately, it's how we collect the data and what is that data for. Next slide. So when I started, we had no data, we had no visitor information, lots of untruthful narratives about the theatre, and I mean untruthful in that we had so many hundred volunteers, there was no proof. And as an academic and somebody who works in engagement, I really needed to understand what our baseline was, where were we starting from, how much money did we need, what was the situation. I could estimate what the building could cost, but I was like, well, what is the benefits of this building in real hard-hitting terms? No volunteer register, no volunteer framework. In fact, just put it bluntly, no idea at all. Let's just skip that, but that's what we started with, no baseline. So we started collecting. Can we have the next slide? So the first kind of data we all look at, and is all publicly available for any organisation, is national data from Audience Agency or other organisation, because we know the Arts Council have changed their collecting point now. You can pay for the Audience Agency data. You can pay for it on a local, regional, micro level. You can look at, and you have the generic Arts Council data of audience engagement. But when you're dealing with a venue, and specifically areas, one of the things you have to look at, especially in terms of most of the major funding now, is your index of deprivation. So these are all available for you. Buildings at risk, if you're a theatre or a building, you can look at the buildings at risk. Percentage, historic gradings percentage, Arts Council ranking, Nesta, UK performing industry. There are literally 20 or 30 sets of data out there which you can access, which are free. And I think it's important to understand that that is all freely available, or some of them have a little bit of a charge, depending if you want to go to the micro level, which is literally your area specific. So basically, I put together a set of data based on all of that, just to understand where the Winter Gardens sat in that. So that was the national data, and we scored really highly on national data. Then in the regional data, I found that we didn't exist. We weren't even registered within the Lancashire Cultural Strategy. We weren't even registered in the Lancaster Rural Organisation Strategy. We just didn't exist. So basically putting us into those narratives of your regional narrative was important. So there was data sets like visitor economies. I spent 7 years working in Blackpool, so I knew the area well. Also, your kind of peers, the number of businesses operating in the same sector, don't see them as competition, see them as allies. Involvement in regional cultural strategies, audience profiles. All of us as organisations probably get hundreds of these requests. Can we take part in this survey? Ask for the survey data specific back for you. You are entitled to it. So these are the different regional data. So national, regional, a lot of this is available. And then I'll go on to local. Next one, slide. So what is raw data, quantitative data? And how do you actually record it, and what do you get? So this is the sum of the stuff that I was thinking would be relevant. So you start with a collection, you start with a baseline. All your funders want to find a baseline. Well, what is your audience? Where do they come from? How do they use it? And when I mean audience, it can be visitors. Collection, this is the standard thing that all of our previous speakers have talked about. Box office data, hirers, promoters. Number of volunteers, but there's a couple of things you might not think of. Counting the number of volunteers hours across a different group, but counting the number of local businesses that are benefited, rather than the generic 2.4 million, which is useful, how many specific businesses? And you'll be amazed at the number of funders now specifically want that micro level. And so I think this is the kind of interest that we've learned in the last 3 years through the different funding. I've had 11 different grants with different funding criterias, and the same data we collect is used to quantify and report for most of them, with a few variations. So that's the quantitative data collection. And so we started with that. So we start the next slide. And then we looked at our online presence on a monthly or annual basis for the following platform: Facebook, website, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. We looked at TikTok, but we're not really down with the kids, and it's not really our audience at the moment, but it might be or will be in the next couple of years. But look at the strength of the audience, and our audience, our strongest audience is Facebook. And that's also because we are transitioning from a heritage site to a performance venue, and that's really going to be the hardest transition, and that's what we're mapping our data for. Next slide. So examples of data recording. So at the moment, we've got 3 different grants we're reporting to, and each funder wanted a different steer, a different set of interpretations on those grants. So the ACS Arts Council, DCMS, CDFs is a steer report, which I'll show you an example of. UK SPF, our shared prosperity funding, and then we had Pilgrim Trust. I didn't share with you Arts Council or MPO because I presumed a lot of you would have that, and we're not an MPO, and we're not funded by the Arts Council, even though our grant is through the Arts Council. We're funded by DCMS. And so that is a very different reporting mechanism. And similar to Colchester, we did an economic impact, but our economic impact was based on BCR, benefit cost ratio. So I'll talk about that in a minute. Next slide. So these are just some of the examples. So we got visitor analysis, and these were on Facebook. That gives you a 4-year analysis from when we started collecting the data in 2020 to what we've got now. And obviously COVID has had an impact on that. And this is what you get from your Facebook analytics. This gives you this free of charge. You can set it to look at this. You can look at which posts get the greatest engagement, which posts get the greatest outreach. You can set it on what age range of the people you're looking at. And that's a really good free tool because it gives you the benefit of understanding we're hitting people between 55 and 65, and we want to get the magic audience of the 18 to 30. And how do we do that? And what post hits that? What post, a bit like Sean says, evaluation was the greatest attendees of this online registration. Why is that the case? So we're all looking for that different audience. So this is just a generic audience patterning. And as I said, this is produced by my colleague who works on the project with me. Next slide. But then we go on to really what a couple of colleagues have touched on, the benefits cost ratio. And it's a green book. It's a framework for systematically assessing and evaluating. So major capital grants outside Arts Council in a way, but really are looking at what is the benefit cost of public investment and what is the gap. So if you do your benefit cost too high, they'll say you don't need public investment because it's commercially viable. If you do it too low, you're not a viable concern. So this is really the basis of what we did, and the evidence that we collected was used by a company to create a report. So for the CDF report alone, we had to send in 13 different attachments of different reports. And we would not have been able to do that unless we'd had 3 years of collecting raw data. So the cost was still high, but substantially lower because we basically set our path that in the next 3 years, we would go for that major funding. So yeah, thank you for putting that, the Green Book appraisal. I'm on the Treasury, I'm on the Green Book network. And frankly, I don't understand 95% of what they tell me, but I'm there just to keep on telling them there is some intangible values just every now and again. But they are now looking at different benefits. Next one. And then there's the monetary benefits. So they look at direct economic impact, visitor spending. Interesting, what the other thing is really looking at is job creation, skills benefit, and they're also looking at the impact of businesses. So all the standard things that you think of, revenue generated, but it's also impact, direct impact on businesses, job creation, skills benefits. So the first two, visitor spending and direct economic impact, are what arts organisations have been doing for 20 years and museums have done for a lot longer. Revenue generated, that's all stuff we've done, but impact on direct impact on businesses and job creation is something that has become increasingly. Next slide. Non-monetary, this is more challenging, and this is really what the Arts Council does really well, and heritage and museums and galleries have been doing it for 30-40 years. But it's difficult to get this across in a value that reflects into the judgmental aspect of the Treasury and other funders who are increasingly using these, and especially when you're looking at placemaking, especially if you're looking at the arts and culture and heritage being a vehicle for some well-being and skills benefits. But these are some of the things you can look at: social and economic impacts, improvements in well-being, education, skills development. We have a project with Langston Waltham College. We accept that 16 to 20 or 21-year-olds don't want to go into higher education. So we've got a project with the Association of British Theatre Technicians, and we are taking 25 to 50 young people through to train them as theatre technicians and technical, and to give them the bronze level ABBT course. We got the money through our grant for that, and that has benefited young people in the area. So we're training, we aim to train 75 young people through our grant, and we pay for them. That course is £790 per person. They can't afford it. They're on low income. But we know as theatre and operators in entertainment and leisure and hospitality and culture and everyone you think, we are really short of freelancers and technicians because 40% left the industry because of COVID. So we are looking, we've got funding to train up young people from the local authority and the government and in theatre. And we work with 3 other theatres in the area, and we share, because we're still under renovation, we haven't got some of the flying facilities which other theatres have given. And in return, we train their staff up who might not have got the bronze medal. So it's an increase of staff in that area. So this is really, I'm not going to go into this, but these are some of the areas that the non-monetary benefits, which is now being calculated within the Green Book. Next one. So what are you measuring? Economic number of businesses receiving this support, cultural types of events, number of local partnerships, number of marketing campaigns, community social number of events, number of community partners, number of new volunteers, number of volunteering opportunities, venue or project specific. This is what I have to return on for my funders for economic money. And next slide. So this is the fund level indicators that my funders, which is DCMS and Arts Council, started with. So they have a national steer where all of the projects are in the CDF, and then they give you a local. So you can see here, economic, cultural, community added, and this is project matrix. So our project is also about the increase in volunteers. So we start with a matrix, how many organisations, how many people have attended the events. This is probably a different kind of indicator, but this is becoming more and more common with large capital projects. Next slide, please. I'm going to finish in a minute. And this is what the Lancaster Council UK SPF Shared Prosperity Fund gave us. And we've had £250,000 from the Shared Prosperity Fund for the Lancaster region over the last 3 years. So this is what we've looked at, businesses supporting Morecambe Winter Gardens. How many businesses were supported in that area for that event, all those events. That's just a snapshot. Next slide. Thank you very much. That was it. So very quickly, and Sian, I'm bang on time.
Well done, Vanessa. Thank you very much for that honest and insightful account of your journey so far in terms of your evaluation practice. And interesting that you also raised the point that Abby mentioned as well about how we learn to use language that our stakeholders understand, and that your data collection models are now geared into that, and some of the complexities that come with being successful in these major funding applications that everyone aims for. So thank you very much. So I'm just going to take this opportunity before we move to our questions to say a massive thank you to all 3 of our speakers for sharing their knowledge and expertise with us and being part of today's event.